When I saw Karen, the woman whom everyone in the neighborhood feared, approaching with a defiant look in her eyes, I knew right away that my peaceful life would never be the same. But no one could have expected that it would all lead to an unimaginable showdown, where power and aggression would be swiftly overturned. Welcome to the Karen Karma channel. Let us know where you're watching from. Leave a comment below. Karen, who lives in this neighborhood, is not an easy person to deal with. Everyone in the neighborhood knows that she is the queen of the HOA, Homeowners Association, always wearing the mask of power and arrogantly believing she has the right to interfere in everything. Karen always acts like a dictator, treating everyone in the neighborhood as mere pawns in her hands. Every time she steps outside, I can feel her sharp gaze, as if she could sever all relationships with just one look. And I, unfortunately, am one of the people who has to face her, especially because of my dog, Rex. Rex, though a large breed with a frightening appearance, has a very gentle and friendly personality. He is always happily running around the garden or quietly lying down chewing on toys, never causing trouble for anyone. But that does not reduce the hatred Karen has for him. One afternoon, while I was watering the plants outside, I heard hurried footsteps on the path. Turning around, I saw Karen rushing toward me, her face flushed, holding a thick stack of documents. She radiated an air of intimidation, as if she were about to fight for something very important. I saw the defiant look in her eyes and knew that today she had something to confront me with. "You need to get rid of this dog immediately," Karen shouted, pointing directly at Rex, who was quietly chewing on his toy. "He's too aggressive, too big, and completely unsuitable for the aesthetic of this neighborhood." I was stunned, looking down at my dog, then back up at her face, still maintaining my calm despite the frustration bubbling inside me. Rex remained calm, showing no sign of aggression. "You think he's aggressive? He hasn't even barked once," I replied, trying to keep my tone gentle. Karen didn't stop. She took a few more steps forward, her heavy footsteps echoing. She leaned down, almost gritting her teeth as she said, "No rules are rules, and you will have to comply. If you do nothing, the HOA will have no choice but to have this dog destroyed." Her words struck me like a knife to the heart. Destroy Rex? How could I let that happen? My hand gripped the water hose tightly, a feeling of helplessness rising inside me. But I understood that with someone like Karen, any resistance would only amuse her more. She always sought to provoke, and anyone who got angry with her just made her feel like she had won. So I decided, despite my aching heart, to remain calm. "All right, I will think about it," I sighed, pretending to accept what she was saying. Karen looked at me, her eyes gleaming with a sense of victory. "Good. I'll come back next week to check. I hope you'll make the right decision." She smiled, a smug grin, before turning and walking away, confident that she had won. But in my heart, I was just waiting for the chance to act. Karen thought she had won, but she didn't know that the real battle was just beginning. Karen didn't just make things difficult once, but rather a series of increasingly sophisticated and malicious actions, as if she didn't want to leave me in peace. Every time I thought things were fine, another situation would arise, making it impossible for me not to get frustrated. One of the first things was when she started interfering with every little detail of my daily life. At first, Karen sent a long email from HOA requesting that I fix the fence around my yard because she thought it didn't comply with the community regulations. "Your fence is too high and the wrong color, which affects the aesthetics of the entire neighborhood," she wrote in the email. I spent a whole week trying to find the right paint and fix the fence, even though I always felt everything was fine and didn't bother anyone. But Karen didn't stop there. After I had finished fixing it, she began paying attention to every other small detail in the garden. She wrote in an email, The plants in your garden need to be trimmed more neatly because they obscure the view of surrounding households. Even though I had already pruned the plants and kept the garden tidy, she kept complaining. Every time I went outside to garden, she stood at her window, watching me as if she were checking every move I made. Sometimes she even came outside, stood right in front of my house, and started pointing and commenting on how I was gardening. "This plant shouldn't be here," she said. "And if you want a tree that tall, you at least need to ensure it doesn't obstruct the view." Each of Karen's words felt like a blow to my self-esteem because I didn't want to bother my neighbors, but I couldn't just keep giving in to her. And then, when I thought the situation was somewhat stable, she would continue with other trickery. Once, I was sitting in the living room, preparing to read a book, when suddenly there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, I saw Karen standing there with a serious look, holding a piece of paper. "This is an official notice from HOA," she said in a challenging tone. "You've left your trash can out too long, and that violates the community sanitation regulations." I looked over her shoulder and saw my trash can had only been outside for a few hours because I was about to take it out. It was really unbelievable that she could pay attention to something so trivial. I could only sigh and promise I wouldn't do it again, even though I knew there were no clear rules about the duration for leaving the trash can out. But that was just the beginning. When I started feeling tired and wanting some peace, Karen moved on to another trick. One morning, when I was in the kitchen making breakfast, I received an unwanted call. On the other end was an animal control officer speaking seriously. "We received a report about a dangerous dog in the area," the person said. "We'll need to come and check." Before I could understand what was happening, the person continued, "All information will be kept confidential." A feeling of discomfort swept over me. "Who made the report?" I asked. "Confidential," the officer replied, giving me no further details. But the person who reported it described the dog as aggressive. I looked out the window and saw Rex lying quietly in the yard, showing no signs of being a vicious animal. When two animal control officers arrived and saw Rex, they sighed. "Honestly, this isn't a threat," one of them said. I immediately understood that Karen was behind this report. When I saw her from a distance, I couldn't help but feel my anger rise. She was standing there, peeking through the fence, her face unable to hide the disappointment when her plan failed. Karen was not someone who would give up easily. I knew that well. And if she didn't stop, I would not hesitate to intervene to protect what mattered most to me, including Rex and the peace in my life. Karen hadn't realized one important thing. She had messed with the wrong person. The dog Rex, whom she still considered just an ordinary animal, was not like the other dogs she had encountered. Rex was a special dog. That evening, as I was sitting in the living room, a call came in from a friend who works in law enforcement. I immediately recognized his voice on the phone. "Hey, did your dog Rex ever get trained in the FBI's K-9 unit?" my friend asked, his tone filled with surprise. "Yeah, why?" I replied, trying to keep my composure. "Well, we got a strange report about it. We've registered Rex as a dangerous, unknown origin dog. Do you want us to intervene?" My friend continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone. I chuckled lightly, feeling as though a cold wind was blowing through. "No need, buddy. I'll handle it myself. Thanks for letting me know." After hanging up, I sat back, thinking about everything that had happened. I knew it was time to retaliate. Karen had become too arrogant and had no idea that she had made a serious mistake by messing with Rex. The next morning, as usual, Karen showed up in front of my house, holding a petition to remove pets. She looked at me with a challenging expression, but before she could say anything, a black SUV suddenly sped into the neighborhood. The car door opened, and two FBI agents stepped out. One of the agents walked toward Karen, his face expressionless. "Is this Ms. Whitmore?" he asked. Karen, immediately realizing something was wrong, glanced around a little before standing up straight, though she couldn't hide her nervousness. I, I'm the head of the HOA, she said, trying to sound confident. Are you here to help me get rid of this dog? The agent stared at Karen for a long moment, his gaze cold, showing no sign of emotion. Then, his eyes shifted to Rex, the dog standing silently beside me, his eyes shining as though he understood that everything was slowly being revealed. You just requested the destruction of federal property, he said, his voice cold and emotionless. Do you know that this dog is not an ordinary dog? He is a member of a special investigative unit of the FBI. Rex has escorted the president on several important campaigns and is one of the most outstanding K-9s in our history. Karen froze. She looked at Rex, then at the agent, as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. She stammered, unsure of what to say. What? She stuttered. The agent continued, not giving Karen a chance to respond. And yet you dared to request its destruction? Imagine if this dog were destroyed for such ridiculous reasons. Important information in investigations could be jeopardized. You could be held accountable not just for violating HOA regulations, but for a crime against the federal government. Karen turned pale, her face seeming to lose all of the confidence it had once had. The entire neighborhood seemed to fall silent, except for her sighs, as all of her plans were completely ruined. She looked at Rex, as if realizing she had accidentally crossed paths with an opponent she could never have imagined. Another agent approached, took out a photo from his wallet, and pointed at it. This is an image of Rex escorting the president on a foreign visit, he said, his voice firm. We cannot allow anyone, even the head of the HOA, to harm an animal that has protected the safety of this country. Karen couldn't argue back, and in that moment of silence, the truth was revealed. Rex, my dog, was not only a loyal friend, but also a hero in his line of work. And Karen, now, would have to pay for her arrogance. Karen ran up, looking as if she was about to cry. I, I don't know. I mean, I'm just protecting the HOA rules, she hurriedly explained, her voice trembling, as if trying to find a way out of the situation. Really? The agent responded, his voice unchanged. It's not just this. We've received reports about fraudulent transactions within the HOA. When the FBI agent mentioned illicit financial dealings within the HOA, Karen looked as if she were in shock. But that's when I realized that the situation had gone far beyond what she had imagined. It wasn't just a confrontation with my dog. It seemed she was involved in something much more serious. The FBI agent continued, his voice unwavering. Your HOA is not a normal organization. We've uncovered a series of unclear expenditures, large sums of money being transferred without transparent records. In particular, there are some transactions related to money laundering from unknown companies. You are one of the people who has the authority to approve and sign off on these funds. Karen tried to maintain her composure, but it was clear she couldn't hide the panic in her eyes. Those are just regular operating expenses. You can't. She stopped when she saw the agent's cold gaze. The agent stepped closer, undeterred. You understand that these transactions are not just simple mistakes or misunderstandings. We've traced these funds through several personal accounts that have nothing to do with the HOA, and more importantly, you are the one who has signed off on many of these transactions. Karen stammered, but the agent's words hit her like a slap to the face. You, you can't. You can't do this to me. I'm just the head of the HOA. I didn't know anything about this money. We've investigated thoroughly, the agent said, his tone as hard as steel. Every trace leads back to you. These accounts were opened with one purpose, to launder money from nuclear sources. And you are the first person under suspicion in this chain of transactions. She tried to stand her ground, but the agent's gaze was an accusation she couldn't deny. You wanted to get rid of this dog just because you thought it was an obstacle to your plans. But now, you are the one who must face the consequences. If you want to help yourself, you'll have to cooperate. The whole neighborhood seemed to go silent at that moment, not a sound. Everything in that instant seemed to be reduced to the FBI agent's cold stare and Karen's terrifying silence, as she no longer had any way to justify herself. Karen had no idea that someone she thought was just an ordinary neighborhood resident, was actually an FBI agent. I had been quietly observing her for a long time, noticing the unusual signs in the way she managed the HOA, the vague financial transactions, the unclear spending, and especially her actions toward my dog Rex had made me suspicious. When Karen started to become too arrogant and tried to make things difficult for me, I knew it was time to take action. Not just because of my dog, but because of the much larger things that were happening right under her nose. I began collecting information, copies of the financial documents and transactions within the HOA that Karen had approved. What I found made it impossible for me to sit still. I quickly realized that the unusual amounts of money from obscure companies were being transferred to personal accounts, most of which were linked to Karen. From there, I began gathering evidence, every financial trace, every shady money transfer, to build a solid case. Every step I took, I had to be extremely cautious because I couldn't afford for Karen to suspect anything about me. That night, when I received a report from my friend in law enforcement about Rex being labeled as a dangerous, unidentified dog, I decided to use it as bait to steer the case in the right direction. I informed my friend about Karen's illicit transactions within the HOA, but kept my identity hidden. In fact, I was the one who reported everything to the higher-ups. Karen ran up, looking as though she was about to cry. Karen almost collapsed right there. Her face went pale, and her hand trembled as she held the request paper. Everything around her seemed to stop for a moment. No one could have imagined that just seconds later, the shiny handcuffs would clamp tightly onto her wrist. No, no, Karen screamed, but it was too late. The agent had grabbed her, and as she struggled, Karen was taken away in the FBI car, like a real criminal. I stood still, watching the car disappear into the distance, with a feeling inside me that was indescribable. This was the price she had to pay. As the FBI car rolled away from the neighborhood, the entire block erupted in applause, a light but freeing sound. Finally rid of her, a cheer rang out, and I could hear the joy in every word spoken. I sat down on the porch step, gently patting Rex, my reliable dog, a loyal friend who never gives up. See, I told you. Just stay calm and everything will work out. I smiled, looking at Rex with a proud gaze, as though he understood everything that had just happened. Rex wagged his tail, his eyes shining as if he, too, was savoring the moment. He didn't need to do much. Just standing by my side was enough to make me feel secure. He was an important part of my plan, and today, he helped me fulfill the mission. As for me, I just sat there, sipping my coffee, enjoying the peaceful morning, with no Karen and no unnecessary conflicts. I could feel the fresh air of a new day, free from tension, free from that feeling that something was threatening. Finally, everything had ended. I looked around and saw grateful looks from the neighbors. Today, not just me, but the entire neighborhood had been liberated from the burden Karen had created. And more importantly, I had shown everyone that justice always finds a way to uncover the truth, whether in the light or in the darkness. Now, it was just me, Rex, and a quiet morning. Nothing to worry about, nothing to hide. Just peace and a brighter future ahead. Has your life ever been disturbed by troublesome neighbors like Karen? Leave a comment and don't forget to like and subscribe to the Karen Karma channel.